What's up everyone, Randy here with Big Slims Barbecue. On this video we're going to be trimming up some briskets. I'm going to show you how I trim them up for the backyard or for catering. So stay tuned and cue that intro. Today we're going to be trimming up a USDA prime brisket for a customer. I picked this one up at Joe's Meat Market in Roy City, Texas. I like to open the brisket up on this hard fat. I'm going to try to be very careful. I'm pulling it out, making sure that I try to keep all that blood inside the bag and it doesn't go everywhere. And then of course just pat dry the brisket and wipe off any excess blood on the cutting board. I recommend using the disposable cutting boards because you can just throw them away. You don't have to clean anything up. You can pick these up at the barbecue store in Hempstead. You can order them on Amazon. Cosmo Q has some. Butcher Barbecue has some. So check them out if you don't already know about them. And the knife I'm using is a boning knife. You can either use that or a fillet knife, whichever you prefer. Just make sure it's sharp and the brisket is cold. That makes it a whole lot easier for when you're trimming it up and trimming that fat off. Now we're just going to cut off this fat right here. I go in at a 45-degree angle, just so that way you can cut off that part of it and don't have to go dig into it. And as you can see, there is still some cartilage on here. I'm going to go ahead and cut that off later. I like to cut it off before I go to cooking if you run across where there's cartilage still on it. If you don't cut it off now, when you go to slice the brisket, it's just going to ruin that point meat over there. So it's better just to go ahead and cut that off. Then I like to take off the silver skin and any fat on there. Trim that up like you would a fish. So if you ever fillet a fish, just basically do the same thing. And just take your time. You don't have to trim off all that silver skin or fat. I like to, just that way, one, will get the rub to stick to that meat, and two, cooking for customers or for my friends or family, I don't want any excess fat on that meat because it's just going to make a bad presentation and it's going to leave a bad taste in the mouth. So let's go ahead and cut it off. And then next we're just going to trim off the side over here, so that way you can see what you're working with on the brisket, and then when you go to trim the fat caps you can actually see and see where that 1/4 inch of fat needs to be left. And it's easier to gauge it that way versus just leaving it on there. And here we're just going to trim off this cartilage. Just make sure you get behind it and cut it all off, because this right here is not going to render out, it's just going to stay there. If you leave it on when you're going to trim it, it's just going to be really bad for you. Next we'll just flip it over, and this point meat right here, we're just going to cut it off again, 45-degree angle. Now I am saving up all those trimmings just to grind them up, make hamburger meat or make sausage. And now we're just going to trim off the fat caps about a 1/4 inch or less. Just make sure you take your time And you just want to trim that fat off to where you get that fat that is buttery and kind of melts in your hand when you go to mess with it. That's the fat that you want on there. That's the fat that's going to render down into the meat. So any hard fat, anything else, just trim it off. You just want to try to get a brisket that's aerodynamic so that way it cooks faster and evenly from one side to the other. And of course, you don't have to trim up all this stuff. You can go old school way, just take it out of the package, season it up, throw it on the smoker, just do whatever you prefer. This is what I've done, how I've learned to do it. This way it comes out at the very end, makes a really good looking brisket presentation. And now we're just going to start shaping the brisket, rounding it out. You could leave that on there. I just like to go ahead and cut it off because I'm going to cut off what people refer to as the eye over here. If you ever seen someone slice a brisket and they get to the point meat, so when they slice it up and they give you that money shot, and you see about a 1/4 inch of fat there, that's the brisket eye. That's what I'm going to trim off. I like to do it now so that way I get a bark all the way around. And again, just kind of shaping the brisket, trimming off anything that's just hanging off or is unappealing. So now we're going to cut off the rest of that eye. Just remove that fat out of there. Like I said, you just want a brisket that's really good all the way around, lays flat from one end to the other.